Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mac Beasley and currently the president of APS. And we appreciate you coming today. There are really two issues which are, I think, paramount in the minds of the leadership of APS right now. And one of them is the issue of corporate reform, and the other is open access / open data. So we felt that it would be helpful to give a report on where both of those activities are. And I will go first and report on the corporate reform. There is a corporate reform initiative. I'll just say a little bit more what exactly those words mean in a minute. And I'll present this, make this presentation today, but it's on behalf of a committee that's been formed to look into this and make recommendations or put up proposals that are for consideration, not hard proposals, but for discussion. And the committee is here, the 4 members of the presidential line, and roughly speaking, the elected members of the executive board, and Cherry Murray, and she is there in an ad hoc capacity because she is the chair of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee of APS, and there will have to be changes in the Constitution and the bylaws. So this is the group. Let me ask those of the group who are here just to stand up so people know they do exist. And if you can't find me or don't get satisfaction when I say, talk to them, okay? They're a good group. I stand with them. I hope they stand with me. No, I think they do. Okay, so what I'd like to do is in more detail than it's been stated before, perhaps, or actually in a more synthesized way, why and what and why of corporate reform, what has happened to date. See, I started it, okay. And the preliminary results, that is to say, what are the ideas that the committee now has that it thinks the community should be talking about? And then something about next steps. Now, the reform initiative has a very serious goal, okay? Nobody is saying that APS hasn't been successful. It is one of the most successful scientific societies in the world. It has the best physics journals. We're international. There's a lot of good things to say about us, and we got here with good leadership and good governance. However, what we think we need now is a governance and operating leadership model that is effective in a world that is increasingly international, complex, and rapidly changing. The question is, are our structures and the way we do our business adequate, sufficient to keep the excellence that APS represents going in the future? And so, with apologies to Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, a world that is flat and fast. Okay? And I think that is the fundamental driver. The scope involves both our governance bodies, to be specific, the council and the executive board, and our executive structure, that is to say the 3 operating officers, that's executive officer, the editor-in-chief, and the publisher-treasurer. Okay? And also important, as you'll see, is the relationship between the executive and the governance level. Okay, so that's what we're about. Now the history and some of the background, the roots of this initiative date back at least 6 years, depends a little bit how you count, but not just last year. Conversations and thinking in the presidential line about whether or not our governance and staff leadership structures, which have served us well in the past, are sufficient to continue to serve us well in the future. That is, things are changing and quickly. And the goals of this APS strategic plan, which many of you, well, you know it exists, and many of you may know what it says, to ensure continuing institutional excellence, that's one of the goals. The other is to achieve one APS, that is to say, to take all the elements of APS and create a coherent structure that can act coherently on the issues that face the society. Okay? Also, when the council and the executive board first were briefed on the thinking here about a reform initiative. Both bodies expressed concerns that they have lost effectiveness and strategic focus and that they welcome corporate reform. Some exceptions, but certainly the vast majority of people feel that way. We also need to put ourselves in compliance with the new rules of incorporation for nonprofit organizations in Washington, D.C., where we're incorporated, and the reforms, and in any event, if we are to conform and be in compliance, we need new articles of incorporation and bylaws, and this is an attempt to put this together. This is not the driver. We have some time here, but clearly our legal counsel says the new rules will be mandatory at some point, so get your house in order now. And the rules are very, very sensible. I won't go into them, but they're common sense. Not, I think, controversial in any way. Now note, this is for nonprofit corporations. The rules for real corporations are very different. So some of the key questions, well, let me just tell you, that the Corporate Reform Committee has sort of distilled out that they feel that we need to think very carefully about is, are our present structures sufficiently strategic and forward-thinking? For example, are they able to recognize and seize opportunities, anticipate and avoid problems? Okay. Nimble and flexible, that's the fast part. Able to self-regulate, reflect on organizational performance and change as needed. Okay. Clear in their roles and responsibilities and the authority and accountability that go with those. And this has to be done in a way that transcends personalities. Presidents come and go, operating officers come and go, less frequently perhaps, but we can't have something that's dependent on a particular personality or something like that. So these are the kinds of things that they've been considering. Now this is not meant for you to read in detail, but it allows me to tell you something about the timeline and what actually we're doing. Prior to this starts in January. Prior to that, there were discussions, of course, in the presidential line and with the operating officers about these issues, and then the decision was made to form this Committee on Corporate Reform, and I've told you what that looks like. And since then, we can go through all of this, but that isn't what matters. What matters is there's various stages, and this is what I want to get across. This document's available online if you want it. Data gathering. We hired some consultants at Signet Strategy. Their experience in this kind of nonprofit corporate reform. And for example, they managed the reforms at the American Geophysical Unit, which is quite happy with what happened. So what data gathering means is they have conducted interviews with the present leadership of APS, former leaders of APS, staff, some staff, and people like that, and later some people outside the APS, but who know it well. So it goes back in time and it goes out in space, trying to get a general picture of how we're viewed. And what comes out of those, of course, is a lot of useful information and a sense of where we are. Not everybody feels the same thing, but you'd expect that. But we have that data, okay? And on the basis of that, so that part is essentially done. We did report to the leadership convocation last weekend, and just after that, we had our first meeting of the committee where we looked at the issues in earnest. It was a 2-day affair, or a day and a half anyway. And so that's what this red line is. This is where we are now. Now going forward, there's some unfinished business for the committee, and I'll tell you where that is in a minute. But now we're going to reach out to the membership. Say what we're thinking, what we're doing, why, how do you feel about it, do you like it, do you don't? Give us your suggestions. So it's a time of reaching out to the members and stakeholders in this business, in our society, and make sure everybody understands what we're talking about and is able to express their opinions in a useful and effective way. That will go on for some time. This is the first formal presentation we've made, I've been talking to various executive committees, but the detail here is greater than has been stated before. Okay. And then at the end of this period, sort of in April, the committee will report to the council on its deliberations and its suggestions, and they will react to that. It's not a question yes, no, or whatever. This is the first time they'll hear it all with the benefit of all this feedback we hope to get. And then we have to vet and refine what we hear, and so we have to go back and refine our recommendations based on feedback. We have various meetings to do that, and then it goes to the Committee of Constitution and Bylaws, and they look at it and essentially start the work of trying to write some new articles of incorporation and bylaws. And then in mid-July, there's a final vote on a recommended legal documents, and then well, this says begin the searches. We'll probably do that sooner for Joe's replacement. And we will be, again, talking to the members, and in the fall, the members vote because we are a membership society, and that's not only legally required, but is what we believe in. Okay? So, again, I want you to get the idea of the steps that are in this and the elements more than the actual details. Okay, so the committee met, and what is its thinking at this point in time? There are some overarching principles, okay? Things we agree must be preserved. The core physics culture of APS. We are an unusual organization, and in our unusualness lies some of the seeds or the elements of our great success. And it's the way we like to do business, it's who we are, it's real culture, and everybody wants to preserve that. There's nobody who denies it. And there are concerns whenever you say corporate, they think that means it's going to turn it into a more hierarchical corporation of a real business sense, and nobody's talking about that. Wouldn't do it, don't believe in it for this organization. We want to maintain the quality of the deliverables to the members in society and hopefully make them even better. Okay, strong membership engagement. We are a membership society. That's what we want to be, and the members in the end have the final say, and we want to improve the ability of the members to be involved in the running and governance of the society beyond what they presently exercise. Trust is always important. So we want to have something that people say, yes, this is a fair way to run business, and we respect one another, and we interact with each other respectfully. Ensure that APS remains the preeminent physics society. That goes back to the beginning. That's what we want. Okay. The point is, we believe, the committee believes, and the leadership, most of the leadership believes, that we need to make some changes in order to do that. Attributes we want in the reform process: data-driven rather than opinion-rich. Everybody's got an opinion, but we want to take the ensemble of those opinions or views as acquired in these interviews, and then have a synthesis of that, so we have something that's a little more hard and what do I want to say? A little more substantive, perhaps, than an individual opinion. We all have opinions. Broadly representative views to inform the process. This is the first sort of real outreach on that. Focus on the top level governance and executive staff defined by the bylaws. That really means the council, the executive board, and the operating officers. We're not reforming all of APS. That's not for us to do. Okay, even if we were thinking it should be done, which is not the issue, not the point. Include a robust plan for member engagement in the process. As I said, this is the first major attempt to do that, and I will show you some other things that you can do to stay with the process and its evolution in a minute. Okay, now the next two slides are the core of what I have to say. The next one in particular has a lot of, well, more text than this. it's an attempt to capture in 2 slides what's going on. I will go slow. Okay, so don't be intimidated by, they look like. Okay, this is essentially how we're organized now. Okay, the council, executive board, and the president. Okay, now, presidential line, and here are the operating officers who are the executive level. De jure, legally, the council is the board of directors. The board of directors is a specific legal term. It is the ultimate, it's the body in any corporation which has the ultimate responsibility for the health, vision, and success of the organization. It includes things like fiscal, fiducial responsibility, strategic planning, oversight of the executive, and they do play a role as ambassadors to the outside world. So that's legally, that resides in the APS Council. As a matter of fact, those activities, those responsibilities are now really lodged in the executive board, which truly speaking is more an executive committee for the council. Okay, it's a misnomer in a way. So you can see that the legal and the reality are not aligned. Okay, and the president is de jure the chair of the board, but de facto, over the years, the last 6 or 7 years, the president has, and other members of the presidential line, depending on the situation, have gotten more involved at the executive level. Okay, if at the end you want me to give some examples, I will. Now that is not healthy organizationally, right? There should be oversight of the executive, but the president should not act as the CEO. Okay, whether we need a CEO or not is another matter, but it is not, this is getting down too low. And so I think what you should take away from this slide, which is, I think, demonstrates at the highest level the issues here. Roles and responsibility have lost clear definition. Okay, all of this is sort of mixed up. The critical link here between the presidential line and the operating officers is clearly not best practice as it is now. That's also not a good thing. Okay? So these are, at a high level, the issues that we see and that we think are inhibiting our ability to perform and get the excellence we want in the future. Now, the committee has talked about governance at some length and is proposing the creation of, well, proposing in the sense of throwing out for discussion, 2 new governance bodies. Okay? There's an APS Council of Representatives. Okay? So we want to establish that. It's based on the present council and has the function of being the most representative body in our governance. All the units are represented in sections and so on and so forth. And this is where the members really can express their voice and their concerns and the issues they feel that APS should be thinking about. Okay? So it's to connect the members to governance. It also serves as the highest body in terms of science issues, how we run ourselves as an organization, and policy issues for APS. It is also the body that must approve APS statements for vote by the members. These are big responsibilities and very high level, and it's where the members can play a role. In order to make all of this much more effective, the committee is suggesting we create a speaker of the council, somebody from the council who is essentially the leader in an organizational sense. And that we create so that there's somebody who speaks for the council. Right now it's the president who would run a council meeting. Then it would be the speaker of the council, from the units, from the members. And we create a steering committee to manage the agenda and operations of the council so that, that through this body, the agenda and what the council worries about and thinks about and acts on reflects the views of the council, not just the presidential line or the executive officers. Okay, so it's trying to empower the membership and create mechanisms by which they own this part of our governance. Okay, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for that to inject some energy and health into the council, and I think it will help a lot. Okay. We'd have to create a board of directors. That's legally required. So we established that. It's based on the President Executive Board. I mean, that's sort of the way we're operating now. So the roles, again, to emphasize are the roles that any corporation board of directors must do, ultimately, is strategy, fiduciary responsibilities, oversight of the executive, and, of course, representing the organization on the outside as needed. We are adding to that the possibility of some additional members selected by the board to provide expertise as needed. The membership comes in, they're always good people, they always work hard, but sometimes the issues are a bit technical or outside the expertise of the members who are there. It's a small group. So we would hold the possibility of bringing in expertise to inform the board and help make the really hard decisions or complicated decisions, maybe even hard. So that's a new degree of freedom to allow the board to have the breadth of intellectual horsepower that's needed for some of the issues that come to us. Create a corporate treasurer. Now, this is not exactly the role that Joe has. Joe is the treasurer in this sense, but also the chief financial officer when you come to the reality of it. This is required by law again, but at this level up in the governance, what the treasurer does has fiscal oversight. Is the society being running sensibly from a fiscal point of view? Are the investments good? Are we budgeting correctly, and so on and so forth? So this person would have access to the board and would represent that part. And create a corporate secretary. We have an excellent person who's clicking the camera, who writes minutes and helps us keep our noses clean. But most corporations have what's called a corporate secretary, keeper of the records at the high level records, institutional memory, and manages the agenda setting. I mean, make sure that the right people get together and really do it. We don't always do it in a timely way. But I think the most important here, in my personal view, is institutional memory. The presidential line moves through the organization quite frequently, one a year. Okay, and some of the criticisms of that say that they don't have institutional memory, and how could they? Well, this is an attempt, well, there are ways, but this is an attempt to have somebody in the governance structure who's there long enough to have institutional memory, can go dig up what was said and keep us under attention. Now, the APS executive, we've done this, we give that to you for your consideration and feedback. We are still talking about the executive structure, so I won't say any more about that. That will come at the April meeting probably when we get there. Okay. Summary thoughts. The corporate reform initiative is now in full swing, no question about it. After its first full meeting, the Committee on Corporate Reform is unanimous in its view that corporate reform is necessary and will lead to a stronger, more effective APS going forward. I don't think there's any exception to that. And over a majority of the people on the committee came in without all the prehistory that the presidential line and so it had. So this was a fresh look, and I think these ladies and gentlemen will agree with that statement. And so it is now time, given this, it's time for broad engagement with the members. As I said, this is why I'm here today. And so how can you stay informed and participate in corporate initiative? Well, you can talk to all of us. But there's also a web page, APS Corporate Reform, and there's the address or URL. It has a video which gives some general introduction to why we're doing this. It has the key documents that the committee is using. It has some documents from our consultants on what modern governance in a nonprofit is normally like. And then there's some historical documents. There's a place, within the next week, we hope to have up some frequently asked questions. I'm keeping track of all the questions I'm being asked, as is everybody else, and we'll try to deal with those. and there's a place here where you can make comments if you want to do it this way. Okay, this is up and running, and you can get it there. So, thank you, and stay tuned.